passenger aircraft in our country in 24 years. 2 months after 9/11, an American Airlines flight crashed in New York, killing all 260 people on board. Then 49 people were killed in a plane crash in Kentucky in 2006. And the exact same number, 49, were killed in a plane crash near Buffalo, New York in 2009. And then last night, an Army helicopter collided with an American Airlines flight on final approach into the Reagan National Airport. It's feared that all on board both aircraft were killed, 67 in all. I'm Ron Hoon. Thanks for joining us today. We have extensive coverage of the crash, the aftermath, the rescue, and now recovery operations, and what has been being said ever since. As a matter of fact for you, we also have both the statements from the president in the last several minutes of a news conference that's been underway. We'll hear from the president, and we'll hear from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, who was there at the White House as well. We also have the statements that were being made in an earlier news conference from earlier this morning. So we will get rolling with all of that right now.
Here's what I can share at this early stage. American Eagle Flight 5342, operated by PSA Airlines, traveling from Wichita, Kansas to Reagan National Airport, was involved in an accident just before 9 p.m. local time on final approach into Reagan National. It collided with a military aircraft on an otherwise normal approach. And at this time, we don't know why the military aircraft came into the path of the PSA aircraft. Flight 5342, a CRJ 700, was under the command of 4 crew members. They carried 60 passengers, as you know, for a total of 64 people on board. In addition to local resources already here in D.C., American Airlines has activated our care team, and that's a group of specialists that are trained to support these types of responses. These team members are on site or arriving soon. And additionally, we have members of our GO team that are on ground here in D.C.
I'm honored and grateful to President Trump for his...
We'll be hearing actually from Tulsi Gabbard just a little bit later on, but that was Robert Isom, who is the CEO of American Airlines, who I understand arrived in the middle of the night early this morning there before that news conference got going at the Reagan National Airport. As I say, we're also going to be hearing from President Trump, and they also got into a Q&A session as the news media finally got a chance to answer or ask some questions to those who were assembled. We'll have all of that now.
So at this point, we can take a few questions. Yes.
Can you say without a shadow of a doubt that people are safe to fly?
What we can talk about today is what happened here with the collision of these vehicles. We said what we know, and that the National Transportation Safety Board continues to investigate. I don't know that any of us have been briefed on anything that would suggest any other aircraft are implicated. Yes?
You're still missing 30-plus people in the water. What are some of the challenges in recovering them right now?
Chief?
So the rescue operation or the recovery operation goes on. It's a lot of touch and feel in the different parts of the plane or in the helicopter, and the crash area is a little spread out, so we've got some work to do. And I think it's a pretty normal type of situation. I don't think it's extraordinary.
How spread out is this debris field?
So the wind started blowing last night, so we've had debris travel from the airport down as far as the Wilson Bridge.
Mile wide, how far is that?
I couldn't tell you. Less than a mile.
This is a question for CEO Carter. You're going to open the airport at 11 o'clock this morning. How are you going to do that? And what impact is that going to have on operations, on passengers, on people's anxiety?
It's safe. We've worked with all the federal agencies, FAA, and you know, it's been determined that we can open that airport safely. The recovery effort that's on our property is on the waterfront. Our primary runway, 119, will be open, It's away from any activity. We're going to have a secure area around that, so all are comfortable that we can get back to operations. Now, each airline will announce or communicate to their passengers what their operations are going to be. Obviously, their networks were disrupted overnight, and so we might have a slow recovery, but the bottom line is we will begin to have aircraft moving in and out of this airport at 11 o'clock.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3. I don't think we can say anything about what's in NTSB's purview.
You mentioned the airport opens 3 hours from now. There's a lot of helicopter traffic from the military, U.S. Park Police, and all that. Will helicopters be flying right through here as well, beyond the recovery efforts?
I don't know the answer to that. Jack, do you have anything to add? We don't have anything to add about that. Yes.
This is for Secretary Duffy. Can you reassure Americans that the U.S. still has the safest airspace in the world?
So the question is, can I guarantee the American flying public that the United States has the most safe and secure airspace in the world? And the answer to that is absolutely, yes, we do. We have early indicators of what happened here, and I will tell you with complete confidence, we have the safest airspace in the world.
What's next?
When it comes to informing these families and family members and loved ones, what does that look like so far? Has anyone been informed? The flight manifest, is there any details you can provide on that front?
Can you add anything?
All I can say is that we have published the 1-800 number. We have family assistance centers set up here in DCA. We do in Wichita as well. I'm not at liberty to give the number of families that have been that have used those services, but we are making that use. We have over 100 team members that are either here or on their way that are specially trained to work with family members, handle travel arrangements, hotel arrangements, incidentals, to make sure that we're taking care of people in any way that they can, as you know, as our teams are hurting and suffering, and as our passengers and their families need assistance. We're doing everything we can. I don't have any more information on that right now.
Chief Donnelly, can I ask you to
So, as we continue to watch the developments that have unfolded, here are some of the images in from overnight. The loss of life, it is believed that everybody on board both of those aircraft died, and that when the plane crash landed, it was in only waist-deep water. By the way, there's a map indicating. It was just on the screen for a moment. But Celeste, I wanted to go ahead and share with folks what President Trump and Pete Hegseth, here's some of the highlights of what they had to say just moments ago.
This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly. And we are a country of, really, we are in mourning. This is really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent of very talented people. Unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office, and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse.
We first and foremost from the Defense Department want to pass our condolences to the 64 souls and their families that were affected by this. Never should happen. And certainly the 3 service members, the 3 soldiers, a young captain, staff sergeant, and a CW2, chief warrant officer, on a routine annual retraining of night flights on a standard corridor for a continuity of government mission. The military does dangerous things. It does routine things on the regular basis. Tragically, last night, a mistake was made. And I think the president is right. There was some sort of an elevation issue that we have immediately begun investigating at the DoD and Army level. Army CID is on the ground investigating. Top-tier aviation assets inside the DoD are investigating, sir, to get to the bottom of it so that it does not happen again, because it's absolutely unacceptable.
And once again, we do have these live pictures coming in. As you can see, some of the assets that were in place in terms of looking for any bodies have actually gone away. You can see how shallow the river is right in that area. So I thought we'd maybe pull up the poll question here as well, because do you feel like flying's become more dangerous in recent years? 52% say yes, there have been too many close calls. 26% say no, flying is still the safest way to travel. And also about a quarter of folks say, you know what, I don't really have an opinion because I don't fly.
Let me read a couple of the comments on that poll, if we can, real quick. Close calls are becoming the norm, which is terrifying for a lot of people, says, Jake Blue Thunder on YouTube. And then we have lowered our standards on everything. Strong Mermaid 4651. So folks do have some very strong opinions, Ron, on this matter.
Yep. And we also have an aviation expert who's going to be joining us after the break with some insight onto how something like this could happen. Yeah. We'll go to that break right now. First, though, here's your mystery. Somewhere across this great country of ours, Celeste, is really kind of a beautiful scene. Looks very serene. We do the mystery cam, and of course we We chat about it during the break. Celeste?
Those are some very unique trees, Ron.
Yes.
So we have a couple people who say Florida.
Okay.
Leo Mack, Lisa Dinsmore said she didn't get to see it.
Oh,
So
yeah.
Lisa's seeing it now. And
Right.
then we do have B. Miguel, Alabama. And Louis Gonzalez says, Mystery Cam was too quick. I know, because it's been such a busy news day today. But
Yeah.
here's another quick glance at it. We still love to hear from so many of you out there. Lil Philosophy says he think maybe Texas. What do you think, Ron?
I think I'm going to go with the Florida folks.
The Florida folks.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
At least it's
go-
not snowy, so it's down south somewhere.
I'm going to go Mississippi.
Okay.
Mississippi.
Here she is, everybody,
Oh,
with.
Greenville, North Carolina.
Oh, for goodness sakes. That's
Yeah.
a pretty looking town.
It is.
Oh, that's
they
great.
had freezing cold temperatures and snow earlier in the winter.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
North
They've
Carolina.
had just about everything. Okay, so we now have an opportunity to share with you some real perspective from an aviation expert. Joining us here on our streaming show, it's Dr. Christy Kiernan. She is the Associate Director of the Boeing Center for Aviation and Aerospace Safety at Embry-Riddle. Dr. Kiernan, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
From what you've heard so far of the various news reports coming out of Washington, D.C., have you been able to come up with any perspective you might be able to share with us in terms of how something like this could have ever happened?
I'm very glad you asked that, because I think that's really at the forefront of everybody's mind. We have been blessed with a very safe record in aviation, especially in the United States, for a long time. And the flying public has reposed a lot of trust in us in the industry and must be wondering, how could something like this happen? I'd like to start by saying that there are numerous layers of protection in the aviation safety system. So in this case, for example, there are defined altitudes that those aircraft should be at. There are collision avoidance systems. There are air traffic controllers who, as we have seen numerous times recently, have been instrumental in preventing incidents. And also, there are well-trained pilots on the flight deck of these airplanes and in the cockpits of military aircraft that are a vital line of defense. Clearly, in this case, all of those layers of defense were penetrated, and that is the question that we need to ask: is what happened, and especially why? Clearly, margins are thinner in some places. You don't face the same level of risk in a highway at rush hour as you do on a country lane on Sunday afternoon. That's not to say that one operation is safe and the other is unsafe, but it is to say that operations do have different margins of safety. And so we need to look especially at those areas and scenarios where that margin is thinner.
Dr. Kernan, can I ask this question? There was
Yes.
some information that came out a few minutes before the jet was to land. Air traffic controllers asked the pilot of the American Airlines flight if it could land then on a shorter runway, and the pilot said, yeah, okay, that's fine. Can you walk us through when that type of a situation happens in one of the busiest airports in the country? You mentioned it a little, but there's so many layers of protocol that have to take place.
Yes, and I think there's a tremendous amount of effort on the in the training and safety departments of our air carriers, which is one reason why we have had this tremendous safety record on risk management. All of aviation safety is predicated on risk management, and well-trained flight crews have to make those decisions as they operate. There's numerous unexpected things happen every day, almost on every flight. The research that I've done, research going on at NASA, exploring what happens really on the flight decks. And so there are a lot of unexpected events that occur, and that's why those crews are trained to be actively managing risk at all times. And so that's just a normal part of operations.
How unique would you say this situation was, where you have on a regular basis military aircraft going up and down, basically on kind of a north-south trajectory, up and down the Potomac River, and then large-scale aircraft coming in, sometimes having to make that turn right over the Potomac?
Right, and that is exactly where that risk management comes in. And we have one of the wonderful tools that we have in aviation safety or safety management systems that are in place at airlines, soon to be at all airports as well, and military are participating in these types of programs. And what they do is they have a very proactive approach to assessing risk. So you look at the totality of the operation, and break down, look, what are all the possible hazards that we could have? What could be the outcomes of that, and how can we mitigate that? So that's an ongoing process. And every time something changes in a system, you have a new, a new component installed. You have a new airfield that you're operating out of. That a part of that is to revisit that hazard analysis process and that safety risk management process.
It sounds like a whole lot of people that have to be trained, obviously, together. Do the training protocols, do they take place together, like air traffic control with the pilots, with obviously the folks on the ground? Or is everybody trained differently? Is there ever a time where everybody comes together?
Not really in terms of like if you're referring to some sort of a simulation or something like that, that would be cumbersome in the extreme, and that would it would just have a lot of impracticalities. However, there is a tremendous effort made so that each person operating in a position understands what the other people are doing. So for pilots visiting tower facilities, visiting TRACONs. Similarly, for air traffic controllers to have the opportunity to experience and understand what's going on the flight deck at these critical times, that type of exchange of information is extremely helpful.
I feel like that there are a lot of people who have the opinion that there have been a growing number of near misses over the last, you kind of put it almost, whether it's the last couple of years or even further back. As you've looked at it, what is your take on that? Are we, in fact, seeing a greater number, or is it just more, more extensive reporting? And if it is happening, why do you think?
But that's a lot of really good questions in one. Whenever incidents occur, near misses, we have to study them carefully, because they could be unique circumstances, or they could be showing some kind of commonality. And that's one reason that the FAA commissioned an independent safety review in 23. And the products of that, the FAA has taken some actions on those, and there's some things that still need to be done. So that was a really comprehensive look at what is happening in in the air traffic control system, and is an extremely valuable document available amazingly with just a couple of clicks. Anybody can read it, and I would encourage people to do that and really to become educated on that.
Well, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I think that is a very comprehensive analysis that I think is really, really helpful. Whenever we do see, even though in aviation, one of the fortunate things is that we have very few incidents and accidents. And so it makes a statistical look at things a little bit difficult, because if you have 1 year when you have one, and 4 years where you have zero, a trend is a sort of a difficult metric. But however, we would be remiss if we did not take this opportunity to do that kind of hazard analysis, risk management that we do generally very effectively, and we really do need to re-examine some of our assumptions, and we have a lot of questions to answer in this particular case. Questions like, did those aircraft see each other? Could they see each other? If they could have taken evasive action, what was air traffic control aware of at the time? So there's a lot of specific questions we need to answer for this particular mishap. But we also do need to take a step back and look at these high tempo operations and high density, high complexity airspace, and put that together with what the independent expert review identified as path forward for the FAA to take.
We really appreciate your time, Dr. Kiernan. Obviously, a wealth of information.
Thank you.
There. Thanks. Hope we can call on you. Well, Celeste, in just the last couple of minutes, this would otherwise be a huge headline this morning, but the nominee for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has just been speaking, and I think we have a chance to listen to some of what was being said with her this.
I'm honored and grateful to President Trump for his trust and confidence in nominating me to serve our country as the Director of National Intelligence at a time when trust in the intelligence community, unfortunately, is at an all-time low. Chuck Schumer admitted a few years ago, quote, "You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you." For too long, faulty, inadequate, or weaponized intelligence have led to costly failures and the undermining of our national security and God-given freedoms enshrined in the Constitution. The most obvious example of one of these failures is our invasion of Iraq based upon a total fabrication or complete failure of intelligence. This disastrous decision led to the deaths of tens of thousands of American soldiers, millions of people in the Middle East, mass migration, destabilization, and undermining of the security and stability of our European allies, the rise of ISIS, strengthening of al-Qaeda and other Islamist jihadist groups, and strengthening Iran. Here are just a few other examples. The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once but twice, and yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop as disinformation specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible.
And so I think, Celeste, on a normal news day, we would be extensive coverage of that. And Kash Patel, who's up for FBI director. We only have seconds left, so I just thought, there's been so much heavy news to talk about today.
There has been.
Let's just remember that we live in one of the most beautiful places on earth here in Arizona.
That is so true.
Look at that snow.
It's gorgeous. And many of you have chimed in and shared your thoughts with us on YouTube. Thank you for joining us here in the chat box, sharing your questions and thoughts, and we appreciate you spending part of your day with us as well.
Okay, so thanks for joining us, like Celeste said, and we'll be back tomorrow with more Fox 10 Talk.